Hey everybody, welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. Today we're going to learn about deliberately developmental organizations, which thankfully has an abbreviation called DDO. So from here on out, deliberately developmental organizations are going to call DDO. And we actually have Andy Fleming, who is a contributor to this book, In Everyone Culture. And we're going to be talking about DDOs. And he's the CEO and founding principal of waytogrowinc.com. That's WAYTOGROWINC.com. So welcome, Andy.
Thanks, CJ. It's great to be with you.
So let's start off with the basics. Tell us a little bit about what a deliberately developmental organization. That is the hardest thing to say.
The abbreviation definitely helps. So I'll give you a couple ways to get into this. One way is a kind of formal definition of a DDO. So in our definition of DDO is an organization where everyone every day, and this is the tricky part or the core part, everyone every day is working to develop themselves, others, and the organization.
Right.
So everyone every day, not just in training programs, not just in outside workshops, but everyone, not just high potentials or senior leaders, everyone from the C-suite to the receptionist.
Right.
And every day, it has to do with the fact that in these organizations, they found ingenious ways to embed development into the work itself, into the regular flow of work, so that people are, as they're doing their work, are also stretching themselves and growing.
Right. So different than the annual review process. Like at best, maybe you have a semi-annual review, but you have a once in a year experience where everyone dreads, right? The managers type out the reviews for their 6 or 7 employees, and the employees fill out the reviews. And it's a kind of, in some ways, kind of an exercise in marketing, because you're trying to talk about how wonderful you are and how wonderful everything you've done is, and then like, and here's some things I can improve. It almost flips that whole thing around, doesn't it?
Completely flips it around, yeah. And one of the things that we talk about in the book, In Everyone Culture, is we say that in most organizations, in fact, we'll go as far as to say just about every organization, that everybody is working a second job.
Right.
And in addition to their regular job.
Yes.
Okay, the regular job of marketing this or administering that or project managing this, that everybody's got a second job that has to do with managing others' favorable impression of them, trying to make themselves look good, trying to wear a mask of complete competence.
Right.
And our perspective is that takes enormous energy and is a drain from the energy that could be going into your first job, and could be going into actually getting better. Because if you're trying to pretend that you've got it all together and that you never make mistakes, then there's no traction. There's nothing you can do nothing you can learn from. Because, we all know it's actually out of our mistakes, it's out of our weaknesses, out of our limitations. When we acknowledge those, that's the platform for which we can grow.
Right. We're not necessarily becoming, I think at the heart of hearts, the review process is to really identify how that person can best contribute to the company. But what in reality is it's actually a public relations document where you're trying to hype up everything that you've done in the most extreme form and, diminish anything that you've done incorrectly, which is, it's interesting. And I love, the reason why I laughed, because I knew you were going to talk about the second job, and it's the idea of, you read in books, and as a coach, I talk to people about you have to manage up. You have to manage up, because it's not only managing your employees, but you also have to manage your boss. What does it mean to manage your boss? It means that you have to deliver consistently and in a quality way so your boss looks good. Because if you don't deliver well so that your boss looks good, then your boss is not going to favorably look at you, and you're not going to ride the little train that your boss is going on. That's basically the finite game that we play in the office is how do you manage up? And then we were talking yesterday about this, about the idea of workhorses and show horses. And the workhorses are the people who, and it's sad because I've talked to a lot of attorneys who work in partnerships. They're like, I am the expert on patent law. I'm like, that's fine. Do the people like you who work with you? No. I don't understand why I'm not getting, I don't know why I'm not getting a larger share of the partnership revenue. It's like, well, because they don't like you. You may be an expert in this area, and he's a workhorse. He's a workhorse, but he's not a show horse, which is the person who kind of like, look at me, I'm doing such a great job. Look at all the clients I'm drumming up. And so that's the second job that you're talking about. And I think we spend I think probably more time on our second job than our first job, depending on the person, right?
I think that's really true. And a lot of the current systems, like you're referring to, the typical, sort of employee development or annual review process really feeds into that. Yeah. And in contrast, just to give you a couple of pictures inside of the DDOs that we studied in our book, one of them has a mistake log. And so whenever you make a mistake log, that's right. Whenever you make a mistake or have an issue that you can't resolve or you may have messed up on, you're required to log it in. Wow. And at a certain point, in a regular meeting, people are going to go through that with you and help you learn from it.
Wow.
And this is at one of the companies we studied, Bridgewater Associates, manager, largest, most successful hedge fund over the last 20 years. And the only unpardonable sin is actually not logging in your mistakes.
Wow.
So that's one kind of contrast.
Right.
A second kind of contrast is in the companies we studied. Feedback flows from all directions, right, all the time. And they even have apps, and a couple of them have apps for that. So you could be leading a meeting, and there are people in that meeting who could be sending you messages.
Like little thumb downs, or what's the app do?
That's right, you're losing us, okay? Or it's not clear what your point is.
So you're doing a presentation, and then you see like a little text message going like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
That's right. So you may or may not, depending on the meeting, you may or may not open it up right then.
Right.
But even immediately afterwards, we've interviewed guys and had them just sort of open up the app on their smartphone and say, well, I led a meeting yesterday, and scroll down and here's all the feedback I got from it. So there's a constant flow of feedback as opposed to the once or twice a year where you may get some formal feedback. Right. And the yield of that formal feedback, that has to do with people's improvement goals and what they're going to do about them, typically, at best, it's, well, maybe we could send you to a workshop.
Right. Yeah, you're like at the annual review. Oh, I have conflict management issues. Well, we'll hire a coach, which is what I've been hired to do. Or you go to a class. Yeah. That's
right. Go to a class, read a book, go watch somebody who's good at it. And none of those things are bad, so we're not saying those things are bad by any stretch. Right. We're just saying they're very limited. And they don't take advantage of kind of some of the advances in sort of management science, the science of human development, the science of human performance. They're inefficient and don't really get you much.
Right. Yeah. I'm contrasting the thing that you're talking about to, I have lots of clients that will send me like, here, I just got this assessment, like it's a tomb, like probably like a 40-page document. And they're like, I know my company spent probably $1,000 on this assessment. And again, they probably do in terms of administrating across a group, probably cost them $1,000 to administer this gigantic test that tells them like how to react in like 50 different situations, and they're like, I don't know what to do with this. Contrasting that to an example where you're doing a PowerPoint and people are like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't feel, or maybe they're saying, and I don't really know what would a kind of example of the feedback. So what you said, like, I don't know, or like, you don't give me confidence. Like how deep is the feedback?
The feedback could be, you lost me at this point.
Right.
Or I didn't understand why we were having this meeting in the first place.
Right.
You didn't explain how this connected, to something, a larger mission or a larger project that this is a part of. Yeah. And so to take it just a step further is that in the deliberately developmental organizations we've studied, they have protocols for how to run effective meetings. So it's not like people are just making up any old kind of feedback.
Right.
It's everyone has an understanding of what a good meeting would look like.
Right. There's a benchmark of like, good meeting looks like this. Check, check, check. You have delivered in this particular way.
Yeah. Exactly.
That.
Exactly. So there are those kind of learning supports, embedded in the organization that enable people to, kind of accelerate their development. And feedback, whereas in most organizations, it's a pretty rare event, that someone's going to give you feedback, particularly unsolicited feedback or feedback that comes outside of a formal review of one kind or another.
Right.
But in a more developmental organization, it's not a big event. Right. It's just like, well, this is what we do, and we have times and mechanisms, and we expect to be doing this.
Right.
And you take the feedback. Sometimes it stings.
Right.
We're human beings. Sometimes it stings, but it's not personal.
Right.
We're here to help make each other better.
Right.
And I may have an observation that could help you get better. And I expect you to be doing the same thing for me.
Yeah. It's out of a place of love and structure. Because what's different about that, because I have a YouTube channel, I'll get comments like, I don't like what you're wearing, or, you're ugly today, or I hate you, which is like, that's not helpful. I mean, one, it's not helpful to me. I'm like, okay. That's I'm not going to be able to change the fact that you hate me, or that, whatever it is. Like, you just get the most random kind of comments. But what I love about the thing that you just described in the example that you just provided, one, it's real time, right? So if you say, you lost me here, I can actually map what I was saying in the presentation at that time to know when I lost you, so I can work on that specific slide.
Right.
The second thing is that it provides a structure, like there's structured feedback, so that, I don't like your shirt today is not part of the structured feedback. So like, you don't get random nonsense that's on that. So the context specific and the real-time feedback I see is hugely valuable, because that person, contrast that to what normally happens, that person, a year from that point, the boss is not going to remember being in that meeting. And I think actually the thing about reviews that I find so aggravating, is that they're very subjective. If you like the person, then you'll give them a good review because you're buddies, you like them, you have a relationship. If you have an issue with that person, you're going to like nitpick at stuff that they don't even know what you're talking about, because unless you can, and if they do, it's about the last and first, whatever the thing is that the last infraction that you occurred gets like disproportionately large. Versus versus the course of the whole year where you may have had like 10 presentations, which were all adequate, but the 10th one was awful. So then all of a sudden you come in your review, you have a boss that doesn't like you, and you get hammered, right? So I think I can see that the benefits of the DDO and actually that kind of ongoing feedback is super, super important. And I see it, and you said that it's different than training, and it's different, right? Because training is, you have issues with presentation, right? Or you get a coach that says, okay, let's work on your presentation skills. So there has to be an opportunity afterwards with any of those courses in order for that person to take what they learned and deliver immediately, which sometimes that doesn't happen, right?
That's right, yeah. Our perspective is that we see, the two biggest issues with regard to training is sort of the preferred solution, let's say, or often it's the only default solution for someone who's struggling. One is you've got the transfer problem. that to be able to transfer something from the workshop setting where you may have worked on something that, is like a case study or something that's unrelated to your day-to-day reality.
Right.
So it can be difficult to transfer that.
Right.
And the second is, it's hard to scale it. You can't send everybody to workshops.
Right.
You can't hire an executive coach for everybody. So there's just, it's not that training's bad. It's just that there's real limitations to it.
Right. It's every day, everyone. And that's the
day,
that's why
everyone.
you kept on saying every day, everyone, because unlike if it's built into the culture, then everyone is getting that kind of feedback every day. They're not waiting till a year later, and it's not as if the high performing people get a coach and training everyone every day. And so what do you see as the results of that? So when people, the DDOs that you've worked with, how can you know if your success, what the success measured upon? Or your metrics or benchmarks?
Well, it's a couple of things, and in some ways, some of the traditional measurements are still applicable. Obviously, performance over time, and the companies we studied have incredible performance, and some later on, if you want to get into that, we can get into that.
So, you mean business performance, like are they profitable? Yeah, okay,
absolutely, yeah. So I mentioned like Bridgewater. Highest performing hedge fund over the last 20 years, very numerically based. If they weren't generating great returns for these, massive pension funds and other entities that invest with them, that money would go away. It'd go somewhere else.
Right.
And the other companies, NextJump, an e-commerce company, rapidly growing, setting performance records, both in terms of revenue and profits for themselves. Decurion, a diversified business, but biggest chunk of it is in the running movie theaters. Highest grossing average per screen in the industry. So you look at those
this is
metrics.
like a perfect way to plug your book, because in your book you actually have the specific stories about those three different companies that use these kinds of practices, and they're very different. They use them differently.
Yeah.
From reading it, they use them differently. The industries that they're in are different, and so that's what's so interesting. Is that it's not something that just works for a service industry or just works. It works across lots of different.
It can work across the board. Yeah. And the other thing I would say that's a maybe a little different kind of metric. And we got introduced to this at Decurion, actually, when we went out and visited them and kind of embedded ourselves with them on several different occasions for extended periods of time. Got to see how they operated and had a very candid conversation at one point about the very thing that you asked about metrics. How do you measure success? How can you tell that this is making a difference? And one of the things that they said and pointed to, and I'd never thought of this way of looking at it before, was they said, okay, typically in our industry, to take somebody from an entry-level professional in a movie theater business and have them sort of get ready to be able to run, full-blown, sort of manage a big, complex theater. It takes 10 years, 12 years, something like that in the industry. Okay, it's a typical.
Right, so they have industry averages on how long it takes to get people on board.
And they say we can do it in 5.
5 years?
5 years.
Yeah, so half the time.
So it takes them half the time to develop somebody. And then when we pursued this, they told us a similar kind of story in their real estate business, that they were ramping up their real estate business and they needed some more senior level financial analysts. And being the company that they are, they had a choice. Do we go outside and hire them? Or do we make an even more concerted effort to grow them within?
Right.
And of course, they decided to grow them within. And they discovered over time that they could get someone to senior level financial analyst in a fraction of the time that it would take someone in a typical company or a traditional company to do it. And so it works beautifully for the company in that they've got somebody who's ready to go and more capable sooner. they've not been on the job for 15 years, so they don't have to pay that premium for 15 years.
Oh, that's interesting.
They don't have to pay to recruit somebody from the outside, and not only pay extra to get the good people away from their current employer, because they're already employed, right? The good ones are.
Yeah.
As well as pay the headhunter who helped you find them.
Right.
Okay. And then think about it from the employee perspective. So they've decided they want to work in, corporate finance. They go to work for Decurion, and they get up to senior level financial analyst faster than their peers that they went to school with. So they're handling more interesting work. They're getting paid more because they're getting paid within the range of the senior level financial analyst. But because they, from the company perspective again, because they haven't been there 15 or 20 years, they may not be at the top end of the range.
Right.
But the employees, geez, I got to this level faster than everybody else I went to school with.
That's brilliant. Wow, that's a hugely valuable example.
So think about any company, if it were to think about, what are the real business driver jobs in our company? If you're a retailer, it's the store manager.
Right.
If we had a great cadre of store managers, if we were better at developing them faster internally than the competition, taking someone that we hired as, the assistant manager in, some department of the store, and we had a way to get more of those folks ready to be store managers faster. I mean, the benefits of that are just enormous. So any company could look at it from that perspective.
Right. Yeah. So just looking at it from the dollar and cents in terms of, hey, think about the amount of productivity that you would, if it took double the amount of time to get those people up to speed, right? So just think about all that lost productivity, right? You could have had that person on the job, paying them less money, like you said, because they're on the lower end of the range, and then also and growing them from within, which I think that you didn't talk about that, but there's a huge thing because it gets a sense of loyalty. Like, I'm not just going to have some random person come in. Like, there's a progression path for me as an employee. I know that they're going to be loyal to me. They're going to invest in me. And so why wouldn't I actually give my 100%, right? Because the problem is I talk to millennials, I've talked to several millennials who are just frustrated. I am just a cog in a wheel. They're just waiting to burn me out, use my very best energy until they've gotten the most out of me, then give me reasons why I can't be promoted or do something interesting, which I may be capable of doing. So it's I can see and you talked about the employee perspective, but I think I hear on the other end when I'm coaching millennials, that's what I hear, right? I can contribute at much higher level, but they're not giving me the chance to do it, and they're not giving me the feedback, right?
That's right. And so one of the hallmarks of a DDO is that they push responsibility down much sooner. So you're taking on more interesting things, more complex things sooner. You're growing faster.
Right.
And one of the things people might be interested in is that at Decurion, because they're able to get people to be ready to be a theater manager earlier, if they don't have an opening for them, and the person is set on, this is the move, I'm ready to do it, I want to do it now, they'll actually help place them in the industry.
Whoa! Oh my God, I just got chills. That's huge.
Yeah. So that it's that kind of commitment to the person's growth. But then you think about it a little bit, okay? How does that, maybe play back to Decurion as well?
Right.
If you become known as the place that cares so much about some individual's growth that you would do something like that, then, are you going to maybe attract more of the good folks than you otherwise would? I think so.
Absolutely, yeah. So in terms of it sounds like you have anecdotal information about employee retention or recruitment or those kinds of things. Do you have, when you talk to your clients, what do they say about employee retention, overall happiness, and recruitment?
Yeah. A couple of things. I'll give you an example from The other company we studied that I haven't said as much about here, Next Jump, e-commerce company based in New York City. They have a lot of web engineers, software engineers, people who are in roles that are in great demand and typical in their industry. Typically in their industry, the turnover is about 40% for those folks, and their folks, they get phone calls, every week from headhunters looking to move them in one way, shape, or form.
Jeez.
And as of a few years ago, NextJump had a typical sort of turnover rate, close to 40%. And they had started down the path and have been working at it for a while in terms of this kind of developmental culture. But they decided they were going to double down on it and really put extra emphasis on it. And they're an amazing company and worthy of great attention. And their turnover rate now is in single digits.
Single digits. Wow.
Single digits now. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's people that for the last 10 or 15 years, the holy grail has been employee engagement.
Right. Right. Yeah. How do we engage
again,
people, get them more involved, and get the best out of them?
And here's our perspective on that, CJ. Again, we said great, employee engagement is fabulous.
Yeah.
But our perspective is, if you actually go for development, employee development, you not only get engagement, you also get their growth as well. So you get both. And we think it's a higher bar to go for employee development, but the yield is not only engagement, because people want to grow. And there's actually a pretty widely cited study. I'm groping just for a second. I'm pretty sure it's a Deloitte study that came out a few years ago that said that what millennials most want, everybody wants a good salary and those kind of things, but beyond that, the two things that they want most are growth and purpose. And so when you think about it, what the DDO delivers on is the growth idea in spades.
Absolutely, in spades.
Part of in a DDO, part of the purpose of the organization is that I get to participate, obviously, in my own growth and development, but I also get to participate in your growth and development. That I'm on the hook, and I'm expected to be helping the people around me grow as well. And that's part of the purpose of the organization. So you get this kind of double hit when you create an organization where, the organization helps me grow, but I'm a citizen of the organization, not just a consumer within the organization. And as a citizen of the organization, part of my growth comes from helping others grow and contributing to the culture that creates the growth. So to go back to Next Jump for a second, they actually do the compensation 50-50. What's 50% of the compensation that they give folks is what it is that you contribute to bottom line performance. The other 50% is what are you contributing to the culture of the organization.
Right, which is huge to me. And how do they measure that? Is it based on, like you said, it's how are you engaging other people? How do they measure that? How do they know?
They have apps to capture and organize a lot of the feedback that people are giving, both giving and receiving, and to see to what extent are people engaged in participating and contributing to the culture. Everyone is expected to required to participate in culture building projects in addition to their regular job. So there's a whole constellation of things, but I'm going to give you the one that sort of typically blows people's mind, is that about every 6 months, every employee participates in something that they call 10X. Mm-hmm. And 10X, think of American Idol. Okay.
God, that's awful.
Okay. Yes. But you when it's your turn, okay, and every 6 months, you give a 5-minute presentation on what you've contributed to the organization in the last 6 months, and both from a performance, but also particularly from a cultural perspective. Right. What you've learned and how you've grown, and what you see is sort of the next horizon for you in terms of your own growth and development. Right. And that's broadcast live to the whole organization.
Oh my God.
And the senior executive team is sitting in front with a series of cards, flipping over, 2, 3, or 4, and giving a person a rating and some short feedback.
Oh my God. And they explain a narrative why they got a 2 or 4?
Yep, exactly.
Wow, that's and hardcore. That's hugely
I want to step back just for a second, CJ, okay? Because I'm aware I'm telling these stories of organizations that have been at this for a while.
Right, yeah, like don't implement this tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So they've been at this for a while. So I wouldn't want anybody, listening to this and say, oh my God, there's no chance that we could get there. And the way that they do that would never work in our organization. Right. Okay. And what we found is that absolutely the stories that we're telling them to illustrate certain principles. Right. But we're not telling them to say that in order to become more developmental and have your culture be more developmental, that you have to copy or mimic these other companies. Right. They've all found their own path and ingeniously, as we studied, and I think on the book, my colleagues, 2 of my colleagues are Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy from Harvard Graduate School of Education, world-renowned experts in human development, and Bob Keegan in particular in the field of adult development is one of the pioneers in understanding how adults can grow and how you can stimulate that growth. And so when we went and with Bob and Lisa and others on our team, Matt Miller, Deb Helsing from Harvard, Claire Lee, who happens to be my wife and business partner as well, when we went and we studied these folks, these companies, we saw that they had intuitively applied some of the core principles of human development. And they've applied them in the context of their own organization. Mm-hmm. So they've made them, through iteration and trying some things, they've made them their own. And then any company that says, look, we may not want to be as intense, quote unquote, and we labeled them, DDO, as these other companies. But you could take some of the principles and apply it into your own setting. Right. And there are some sort of starter things that you could do, and you could go down the path. Right. You may or may not decide that, someday you might have something as intense as, what Next Jump calls the 10X. Right. Their American Idol style thing. That you may or may not go there.
Yeah, like they're the Iron Man of stuff, run like a 2K or 5K, and you don't have to do the Iron Man.
You certainly don't have to start there. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to step back.
Yeah.
Make that point because a lot of people look at some of the stories that we tell and that I'm telling here, and go, oh my gosh, we could never do that. That wouldn't work here, and that's not really the point. Right. The point is to say what are the core principles that you could apply in your organization so that you get, the everyone, everyday kind of idea going. Right. In a way that works.
What are the core principles that you think are, I know that you actually have a whole chapter on some core principles, but what would you say is a top line of the core principles that people would
Yeah. So so after studying these folks, we stepped back, kind of did an analysis from a big picture perspective of, okay, when we look at what they're doing as it relates to sort of the science of human development, we see in broad strokes there's really three dimensions that they're working from, mm-hmm. and there's an integration of these three dimensions. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to invite you to and your listeners to kind of picture the classic Venn diagram, the three circles that has an overlap in the middle, and so each one of these principles is going to fit, or dimensions is going to fit into one of those circles. So the first dimension that these organizations have is what we call edge. Mm-hmm. And edge has to do with the fact that every individual, every team, every unit, and the business itself is out on some kind of developmental edge. Mm-hmm. It's deliberately out of their comfort zone.
Right. You're stretched,
in some way.
Yeah.
You're stretched. And so from an individual perspective, the expectation is that every individual is going to have something that they're working on,
right.
Publicly.
Right.
And it could be becoming a better listener, delegating better, being more organized, whatever it might be. People are going to have something that they're deliberately working on. They're going to be on some kind of an edge
right.
for themselves.
Just to clarify, this is like something that they're personally trying to develop. Their edge may not be like, I'm trying to get like 5 projects out in a week. That's not what the edge looks. It's their personal developmental edge.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So what and Decurion is, they're all in their own way explicit about this, but Decurion is explicit about this as they've shared with us. They said, look, we want everyone to be in some kind of a unit or on some kind of a team, that the team has a stretch goal, so that the team is sitting around, now they've got this goal, and they're looking at each other going, I don't know how we're going to do that. Right. And what they want the team to come to is, we're going to have to do some things differently. And then what they want individuals to come to is, I'm going to have to do some things differently. I'm going to have to get better at delegating or listening or working across functions or whatever it might be. So the business goals create a context. And their language is, they create a developmental pull. Okay? So let me try to bring this home, maybe for you.
And just so the Decurion is the movie theater, right? So one of their goals may be, we're going to expand in 10 markets, or like we're going to double our geographic expansion. So that would be a business goal, and then there would be specific. What does CJ? What does Andy? What do we have to do in order for us to double the geographic expansion of Decurion?
That's right.
So that's right.
Okay. If we were part of a team within Decurion, it would be what does this team need to do?
Right.
And then goes right down to the individual. What do each of us as individuals need to get better at in order to contribute to the team that contributes to the organization?
Okay, got it. So it wouldn't be like, I have to get my business plans out faster. It doesn't look like that.
It can.
Right.
But there's also this overarching business context that creates this sort of energy that it sort of encourages you, or almost sort of forces you to grow.
Right.
I mean, you really don't have a choice.
Yeah, what I could see saying, okay, in order to have the geographic expansion, we need to do analysis, and the analysis part takes 3 months. And so what we need to do is shrink that in half in order to actually hit these many more things. So what would CJ have to do in order to actually shrink that analysis? Well, I would have to be less of a perfectionist, or I have to delegate. So it comes in that kind of context.
That's exactly right. Okay. That's exactly right. And part of it is also, we chatted a little bit about this yesterday, I think, is that it would lead me to have to both surface and then challenge some old assumptions.
Right.
I may have some old assumptions about the way we've been doing things previously, because that's just the way we've been doing things.
Right, yeah.
And so I'll have to rethink those assumptions. Does it have to go through, as many hurdles as it has to go through? Do I need to have the marketing, the initial plan, as detailed as we might have had it last year? Those kinds of assumptions.
Right.
So what in a DDO, one of the benefits of it is that people are constantly sort of being really required, in a sense, to examine their old assumptions, both collectively, but also individually.
Right.
And one of our definitions, as it relates to kind of human development, is that development occurs when we're surfacing, engaging, or testing, and then ultimately transcending our old assumptions, our old limiting assumptions. And these organizations that we studied are really a hothouse or a greenhouse for that happening. They're not for the faint of heart. To have your old assumptions continuously sort of up for examination.
Right. So the edge is the edge is like a business goal. Then after a business goal, it's like, what do you need to do personally? What do you need to do collectively? What are the assumptions that you hold on both? And how are you going to transcend that? And the whole group, you're going to hold me accountable. I'm going to hold you accountable for it. If you're like doing something and you said, oh, I'm such a perfectionist, I'm like, and you hand the report, I'm like, are you still being a perfectionist, Andy, on this? Like, I see you doing all this stuff, and you could probably you could do it at the 80-20 rule and be totally fine.
That's right.
So that would be
or test it. Yeah, try doing it at the 80-20 rule and see what happens.
Right.
See if it turns out to be true or not, that you needed to do that extra 20%.
Right. Do it at 80% and see if anyone cares. And everyone's like, that's great. Andy, you're like, oh, I just saved a bunch of time.
That's right. So to go back to the circles then, the 3 dimensions. So one dimension is edge. Mm-hmm. Okay, so people are stretching and being stretched out of their comfort zone. The second dimension, though, is what we call home. Mm-hmm. So if edge is kind of the challenge side, home is the support side of a DDO. And in the organizations we study, there's like ecologies of developmental communities that people are a part of. They've got multiple relationships, including their regular work team and other groups within the organization that are supporting them in stretching and also holding them accountable in stretching. Mm-hmm. So the support, it's not a kind of coddling sort of support. Right. It's not, oh, it's okay, CJ, I know
you did your best thing.
Yeah, it's not that kind of support.
Okay.
It's the support of CJ, I know you've got it in you. I know that there's much more that you could do. I know that you've got a certain capacity that we haven't fully, seen yet. And so I'm going to hold you to that. And so when you fall short or when you struggled, let's really look at what was holding you back, okay? And what were the thought patterns? What were the behaviors that led you to sort of not be able to step up like we know that you can?
Right. Yeah. As a coach, that's one aspect of coaching. So someone says, I have a goal, they don't achieve the goal. And so you're holding them accountable for the goal, and you're trying to figure out what got in your way that you couldn't achieve the goal, and you strategize with them to help come up with removing those blockages. So it's kind of like it's almost like a coaching relationship with your accountability partners that you have in the office.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So instead of maybe one executive coach,
right,
and a brilliant one like you, CJ, I'm sure. You've got multiple coaches, in and around your office that you interact with every day.
Yeah, so like a group, maybe like my personal group, I'm trying to expand, geographically expand the Decurion brand, whatever, number of theaters. And then I actually may have another group. Like, what would another group look like? Like, let's say that my issue is time management. Would I have a group of people that I work with that are all focused on time management issues?
it would typically people have a smaller number of improvement goals that they're working on at the same time. So the people in your different circles, that your regular team, the people that the other people that you just interact with regularly,
like the person I have lunch with every now and then, like my buddy that I go running with, like those kinds of things. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So it's not the idea and sort of kind of the science of human development and my colleagues Bob and Lisa, their work around, and we may get into this later, around the process that they call the immunity to change process. Their work suggests that it's more effective if people have a smaller number of improvement goals that they're working on, like one or two. That they're going deeper on, and what the yield is though is that the things that are holding us back on like one improvement goal, those are probably some of the same things that are holding us back on other improvement goals.
Right, I see. Yeah.
And so there's a little bit of magic is that if you get released sort of in one area, it usually has impacts across other areas.
Right, because your life is connected.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so one is the edge, and then there's the group.
It's home.
Home.
Yes.
Okay, so talk a little bit more about home. Home is actually getting your groups of people that are your
support
coaches. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the third circle, and typically when we draw this, there's edge, home, and then the bottom circle that sort of supports too. It's the dimension that we say. That's the dimension that puts the deliberate into deliberately developmental. And we call that dimension groove. Mm-hmm. And groove has to do with regular practices and regular supports that are kind of organizational habits that are sort of grooved into the system so that they recur and are available for folks all the time. If you think about learning martial arts or, any kind of martial art or any kind of instrument or, anything that you take seriously.
Yeah.
It's practice. And the best kind of practices are deliberate practices.
Right.
And so in a more developmental culture, there are practices that recur regularly.
Right.
And often not they don't have to be incredibly sophisticated.
Right.
It's just people having the occasion to ask each other about, what happened yesterday as it relates to the thing that they're working on.
Right.
And then exploring where there might have been stuck points or difficulties.
Right.
And so it's a whole series of evolving practices that support both edge and home, that support the fact that we're going to always be challenging and always be sort of supporting and holding people as they grow.
Yeah, and you explained sort of what I'm seeing is when we were talking about the example that you provided in the very beginning about someone having a problem in a presentation, right? So some of the groove things were the people texting and saying that I didn't get this, and then there's a whole practice built in at the time of the person giving the presentation, right? And there was a practice on what the presentation should constitute and what are the variables you should be judging. I mean, so all of those things to me is that what the groove is?
Yeah, that's right. And part of groove would be a common understanding of how to run a good meeting.
Right. Yes.
It would be part of the groove.
Right.
A common understanding of how we're going to deal with conflict and disagreement, so that we use it in a way that not only resolves it most effectively, but also uses it as an occasion for the parties who have a disagreement to actually learn and grow. And so to have those kind of standard practices in place, which takes attention, takes effort, but to have those in place makes the learning be able to happen for everybody every day.
Yes, love it. Okay, we've been talking to Andy Fleming, and we've been talking about a book that he was a contributor of. It's called An Everyone Culture, Becoming a Deliberately Developmental Organization. So this is part 1 of 2. And so in the next section, we're just going to try to really give you an experiential sense of what we're talking about. What does one of these, how do you actually develop your edge? What are some of the tactics that you could do, whether you're individually or running a small group or actually part of a bigger organization? Thank you so much. And so your website is called Way to Grow. Tell us the URL again. Where did I have it on? Way to Grow Inc.
Way to Grow Inc.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's Way and then the word TO, Grow,
yes.
INC.com.
Yeah.
Yes. And then also, if you want to know more about a DDO, there's, of course, this wonderful book of which Andy contributed. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks a lot, CJ. I really enjoyed it. Okay.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. I would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.